Okay. A very good morning to everyone, to all the students, of course, to Dr. Yuyun Sunesti, the course director of this program, to Dr. Pisat from Cambodia. Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you again.
Yes, nice to see you, Dr. Ita.
Okay, so today is our day 5 of Deep Asia Summer course. And last week we have learned about politics and governments, media and culture. Yesterday we have discussed and learned about economy. And today we will raise the issue of ecology. And we are very happy to have Dr. Yuyun already invited Dr. Pisa from Cambodia. He's a colleague of mine, of us, and Dr. Keo Pisa's joined Asian Vision Institute in February 2019. Right from the birth of the institution, he served as the Vice President and the Director of the Center of Sustainable Development Studies. Dr. Keo is a policy advisor, researcher, and practitioner in the field of development and environmental management. For more than 15 years of his professional career, Dr. Keo has been driven by his inspiration and passion to contribute towards sustainable environmental management and inclusive development in Cambodia and in ASEAN region. Over this period, he has engaged in diverse career paths, from being a public servant at the Cambodia Ministry of Environmental Researcher, lecturer, project manager, project chief and technical advisor, and freelance consultant as well. Dr. Keo received his doctoral degree from the joint doctoral program between National University of Singapore and Harvard Yensing Institute in 2018. And his master's degree from Australian National University in 2010. Dr. Keo will talk about ecological crisis in Asia, and we have 1 hour with him from now on. So the time and scene is yours, Pisat.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ita, and then thank you to Dr. Yuyun and all the organizing committee for inviting me to this very important event, and also warm welcome to all the students and participants to this course. I believe each Asia is very interesting. There's a diverse of topics to cover in this course, and the topic that I'm going to talk about is the ecological crisis. And I'm not sure to what extent you know about ecological crisis, about the ecosystem and so on. So I assume that you are just maybe at the beginning level. So I decided to go for a very brief introduction, actually go for a general, provide you the overall overview of ecological crisis, ecological issues around the world, and then go to the regional levels. And if I may, could I share my slide, please?
Yes. Do you share it by yourself, or?
I could share, yeah, I can share the screen by myself.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. So do you see clearly now? Okay. So in this presentation, I will start with the introduction to what is ecosystem, very brief the definition of ecosystems, and then I go into the driver of ecological crisis, and then move on to the human population and ecological crisis. And of course, human population is one of the key and the defining factors of ecological crisis in various regions around the world that cause global disaster and crisis. And we have the proposed solution here. I get you one of the new findings from the Intergovernmental Agency working on biodiversity. that just published recently in 2020. And then I go to 3 case studies of ecological crisis in Asia. So let me start with just a brief definition of ecosystem, what it is. So ecosystem is a dynamic complex of plants, animals, and microorganism communities and non-living environment interacting as a functional unit. So with that definition, it's clear that it's in one specific area, there's an interaction between the living thing and non-living things in one specific unit. It can be, if you imagine in real life, it could be the river, it could be the lake, it could be forest, it could be marine ecosystem. So they are, and the ecosystem, the new unit itself, it could be small or big, right? There are river that can fit into one transbound to one national boundary, while the other river, as you may have seen, there are like Yangtze River or Yellow River or Mekong River. It goes through, and many other rivers like Danube. It goes across so many countries. And if you mean to follow the boundary line, each country may just build dam or build a fan on the river, but it does not work that way. The ecosystem, the natural ecosystem, does not follow our national borderline. It follows its natural flow. So people have to work together from one country to another to collaborate, to manage using the ecosystem approach. I mean, follow the ecosystem from where the river starts and where the river ends, how it connects to the other system. So the ecosystem approach is more about follow a natural flow rather than imposing our individual or human created boundary. And as you can see, quite a number of environmental issues in the region, in ASEAN, or in Europe, or in other parts of South Asia, you could see there are a lot of problems that the environment are generally, environmental issue or ecological issue are generally linked to the, are usually transboundary. For example, the haze pollution, for example, an activity in one country, in the north, Indonesia or Malaysia, based on the local, with the local agricultural practice, it can lead to the haze pollution that can affect other country, not just in the one locality. So it goes come back to that ecosystem is it's unique. It's one natural unit, functional unit that can go. It can be small. It can be large, and it can go across many national boundaries. And so, what are the drivers of ecological crisis? And these are these drivers. I just use the common practices, the agreed definition used by the Millennium Assessment, ecosystem assessment, and also the recent one by the Intergovernmental Panel for Ecosystem Assessment. Direct drivers are generally habitat change. It can be land use change, or physical modification of river or water, withdrawal from rivers. Land use change, you can say about conversions of land of forest, primary forest, into agricultural land, or the modification of the river. Some in certain part, particularly for urbanizations, a lot of areas have been modified or converted into the constructions, and a lot of river have been a field for constructions, and it really interferes with the flow of the river, and it changed the river ecosystem. And of course, the ecosystem, sometimes it leads to the complete collapse of the ecosystem. Sometimes, if it given enough time, the ecosystem can return, because natural the ecosystem have a natural capacity to regenerate, but it may not necessarily be the same when it is changed. And then the habitat, beside the habitat change, we also have over exploitations. If you look at fisheries, in marine fisheries, a lot of fish being overemployed using unsustainable practices. And some of the practices have destroyed the habitat, shelter, or fish, the feeding ground of the animals. And it has been one of the major problem with over exploitation at national level and also at the international level as well, when the ocean, especially for open access, there is no governance and everyone is free to do. So they tend to exploit as much as possible in order to gain profit from their activities. That if you may have heard about the tragedy of the commons, when the area are leave to for open access, there is no governance, there is no management, and it lead to a serious problem which we call the tragedy of the commons or the collapse of the ecosystem. And then we have invasive alien species, the interaction of species to a new place. And in some country it doesn't take it serious, but in other country it really serious. Like if you go to Australia, even one airport, you cannot go across from one state territory, from the north cannot go to the west or other part, because there were what called ecological calamity, the introduction of new species like tilapia, the fish tilapia, or rabbit. This kind of rabbit, you think that this animal is a soft, if they are gentle, how come they're gonna create any ecological calamity? Of course they are soft, but when it comes with the right living conditions, their population can grow high. And when they grow really rapid, they use all the food that's supposed to be available to other species. And with the high population, it creates to the shortage of food and lead to the collapse of the ecosystem. Again, if you look at the kangaroo in Australia, it's a national symbol. But because of the what we call good level of protection in Australia, the number, the populations of the kangaroo going sharp, going high. And so there's a national day where the people can kill kangaroo, because if it's out of control, really the kangaroo can destroy the habitat, and it can also cause harm to other animals, even to the people. They come to the city, they interfere with economic activity and create a lot of problems like accident and so on. So the invasive alien species is one of the key issues in biological diversity conservation. Yes, some countries are strict, some countries are not, but internationally, it's the alien introduction of any new species have to be very careful. And if direct driver it's pollutions, you can talk about the. Hello, you hear me? Okay. The pollutions, they have different type of pollutions. Mainly, if you look at the water ecosystem or marine ecosystem, the pollution are largely come from solid waste, or we call municipal waste. That, for example, plastic waste, it goes into the water system, and it pollute, and it can create the animal plastic are consumed by animals. You can see in different videos that the birds on the coastal area, when you they consume too much plastic, and there's high rate of death, animal death, because of the consumption of microplastics. And right now, the amount of microplastic being discharged into the river ecosystem, and also into the oceans is really high. That raises one of the key concerns for global debate already, that need to be resolved. And the problem have to solve, especially for the ocean, need collaboration from international level. It cannot be solved by one country. Besides solid, it also pollution. Besides solid waste, we also talk about sewage as well. A lot of country, they discharge sewage directly from factory, from household without any treatment. And if it's factory waste, sometimes in industrial heavy metal like mercury, it can create really big problem. If it's just normal sewage, it already have problem with nitrogen or algae blooms, where the ecosystem is being polluted, and the nitrogen is too high, and it's lead to the shortage of oxygen in the river. It lead to pollution. It already killed the fish. But then, if you look at the heavy metals pollution, it can create a lot of problem for the aquatic resources. And human, when human consume all those aquatic animals like fish or snails and other species, it all this metal, heavy metal also comes into our body, and it affects human health. And another direct driver is climate change. Climate change is caused by human activity as well, and then the change, global warming can easily affect the ocean water, and it affects the coral reef. It lead to coral bleach, or it destroy habitat, or it change in the humidity in the soils and so on. So these are the direct drivers. Actually, the direct driver mostly largely come from the human activities that lead to the response in order to meet the indirect driver like population growth. Of course, major problems of the eco crisis is from the population growth. I will go to the slide on the population growth on the next slide, and how it population have increased rapidly in the last 50 years or 100 years. And we have a demand for our own consumption. We need urbanization, we need global productions, and also we need to provide a lot of supply for humans. And then with that demand and supply, it creates a lot of ecosystem problem, because, for example, timber blocking to supply human demand or contractions, or we talk about the overfishing, or we talk about the fuel-based consumption for energy supply. So all of this led to human population growth. And of course, change in economic activity, the more country develops, natural energies, and the change lifestyle, it also changing a diet, food consumption. It also changed, it lead to more pressure on the ecosystem. And social political factors, the country political situation, and can also affect the can lead to ecosystem crisis, and cultural factors and technological change. Cultural factor is more about the cultural belief practices, how people interact with the natural resources, how they consume. Some may consume less, while others consume more. And technological change, it can use for the better, but more of the time it can become more efficient in exploiting resources, for whether forest logging, or whether it fish catching, or go for more efficient practices. Some even use the dynamite cyanide like pollution to kill the animal using this poison. So technological change can be good if we apply for patrolling, monitoring, and so on, but it's really destructive to the ecosystem. So this is the summary of the drivers, key driver of ecological systems. So if you look at on the left-hand side, as I already mentioned, we have demand for human being and poverty reductions, and we are on the right-hand side, the direct indirect driver of change. demographic, economic, social, political, science, technology, cultural, and religious, and direct driver of change down there. And of course, when they have this driver lead to the affecting the quality of ecosystem services. And ecosystem services, they provide services for us in different form, like provisioning, providing food, water, fiber, fuels, medicines, and so on. And they have the regulating climate regulation, water, disease, or soil protection from landslide, or provide the soil fertility, and so on. And we have cultural benefit for spiritual, aesthetic, recreations, and educations. And of course, they are supporting services, including primary production and soil formation, and so on. This is the graph from the Million Ecosystem Assessment in 2005. And as I said earlier, there is a causal relationship between human population and ecosystem ecological crisis. Everything, actually, the pressure on ecosystem are basically to meet our demand, to meet human demand and our lifestyle. And with the increased population and resource demand. And it also will not go into details on how the resources are distributed. Right now, some put blame on the people on the developing country that, hello? Hello, you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Go on, please.
Okay. Okay. Of food inequal distribution of the ecosystem ecological resources as well. And you see a lot of people are still suffer. If you look at the political ecology of resource distributions, a lot of resources are being in the developing countries, or in each country itself, the food are being produced in rural areas, and those people in rural area could not even have access to the food they produce, because they need to produce and supply to urban area or supply to other countries overseas. When the light consumption is being concentrated in the area where they have the economic power or consumption power. So there is another areas on the global resource distributions that we can look into as well. So what I'm sharing today is just about the overall causal relationship between the human population and ecological crisis itself. But if you go into detail, we can look at on the inequalities and the politics of resource distribution itself. Yeah. And here is the graph of the population growth. If you look back into if you look even further, 1,000 years ago, it takes 1,000 years to reach 1 billion people on Earth. And then when it reached in the 1950s, just before that, it already reached after 50 years from 60 years later. You can see how my population have grown. It already more than tripled all the population. So this, and it expected to grow even further. And there's actually the debate about the human population and the carrying capacity of the Earth. How far can the Earth carry and continue to provide resources for human being, and to allow human being to live in a healthy and comfortable lifestyle. But actually, according on some school of thought, they already said that we already reached the carrying capacity, because you see millions of people do not have food to consume, and there's a problem of water scarcities. There's not sufficient healthcare
and also other environmental problem. It happened all over the place already. If you look at the air pollution, look at marine pollution, look at the river pollution or deforestation. But again, another camp, they also said, come on, we have technology, we can solve the problem. So just let the population continue to grow. But to me, if you look at from the ecological point of view, I think that the population, it's really need to be controlled in a way that it's safe and humanistic, not controlled in a very harsh way. But we really need to control, because if it continues, I could not even imagine how far it will go, if what will happen to the earth or to the human itself when the population continue to grow even further. As projected, by 2050, it's already more than 9 billions, and if we continue now to up to 2100, it continue that to that level. I don't know what's going to happen. And here, if you look at the impact of population growth, if you look at the biodiversity extinction, if you look at based on the fossil record, the rate of extinction is just less than 1 when extinction every millennium. And then if you look at recent past, look at mammals, birds, and amphibian already high, and its current extinction rate is up to 1,000 times higher than the fossil record. And then if we project for future with our own rate of consumption, it may be 10 times higher than the current rate, and even or maybe higher than that. So the rate of biological extinction is really high, and not biological itself. It also affects the river that we consume. It affects the soil. It affects the airs and many other things as well. So with that was the point of we have to pay close attention to the population's control. And here I would like to bring you. Here's the rate of biodiversity loss that I use a copy from the key finding from IPES. The average of around 25% of species in of animal and plant being threatened, and 1 million species already face extinction, and local variety and width of domestic plants and animals are disappearing, and biological community are becoming more similar to each other, even the both managed and unmanaged system, and human-induced change are creating conditions for fast biological evolution. It really worrisome for the biological diversity. And if you look at climate change, you look at this one. Why I talk about climate change here? It actually, as you see, the first driver of direct driver is also from climate change, and with the human population growth, fossil industrial revolutions, fossil based energy productions, we can already see the high level of the greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere. In the past, less than 300 parts per million, and then it growing higher and higher. If without intervention, if it reach from higher than 650 parts per million, there's like the assumption is there's no reversal for the effects. And even with the current concentration of greenhouse gas, we already feel the impacts from climate change that happens all over the world. And actually, we already based on the scientific projections or assumptions that it already, even we stop right now at the current rate, the impact will continue for another 20, 30 or even half a century until it reach the stability. So, and if we continue, the catastrophic is unpredictable, and we cannot imagine what's going to happen if we do not take a serious action at this time. And here, again, the concentration of it's just a graph of concentrations. And so the Okay, I will just go faster on this part. So the proposed solutions. This is the proposed solution from the intergovernment panels on biodiversity. They propose we need to take integrative, adaptive, informed, inclusive governance approach, including smart policies, mix and apply, especially in leverage points. We need to do incentivize and capacity building, cross-sectoral cooperation, and so on. So there are different approaches that we have to do. And actually, we also go into the level of individual, the change of our lifestyle, our consumptions, and we look more into the environmental friendly practices and many other things. So there are calls for for transformative change of our current practices and governance and closer collaborations from at international level, national level, and local levels. But then it comes to the key issue, the core issue that we have to address. Actually, it's all, I use the quote from Chris Hedge, all measures to support the degradations and destruction of our ecosystem will be useless if we do not cut population growth. So again, population growth is the problem. Population growth, again, is good, but we run out of resources, so we need to control in a way that are safe and good for everybody. And the total, again from Carl, total number of human beings dwelling on the planet Earth must be inevitably figured in strategic equations. But strangely, however, the population equation is generally ignored or downplayed in public discourse, even among most environmentalists. And the prevailing view is that the economy and the population should both be allowed, in fact, encouraged to grow without limit, a spiral indicator of human progress. So as it comes back to my point earlier, it's there's one school of thought say that we have to control the population, cut population growth, while the others say, yeah, we just let their population growth is very important for the economy. Yes, certain country, the human population growth is important for growth, for economic growth, but it also lead to it also not sustainable. And if we look at the global level, look at the planetary level as a whole, it really worrisome. So there's a lot of debate around this discussion. So I just sum up my general introduction about ecological crisis in general for that, and then I go to the case for Asia. And I will use 3 case study. First one, I start with case study of marine. This one just introduction to Asia in general. But for the case study, I use marine plastic pollutions. We talk about deforestation in South Asia, and then river pollution in Yangtze River. And the population in Asia, we are cover actually more than 60% of the population already, and we have two most what called the populous country are China and India, and Indonesia ranked 3rd. And we also witnessed the sharp increase of population as well, and we expect that it will reach a peak in 2050, and then it will decline by 2100 by the end of this century. And so Asia is also home to 54% of the world urban population as well, followed by Europe, Africa with 13% each. And so the first case study is about the marine plastic pollution in Asia. If you look at the ratio here, China has already produced plastic 31%, Japan only 3%, and the rest of Asia is 17%. But China itself, actually, they do not necessarily produce all the waste. They are also being dumped by a lot of people also, a lot of country also export waste to China as well, and China start cracking down on waste import from other country as well. So there's that also create problem for other country in the waste related to waste management in their own country, because they used to just export waste to other country to dump in other country with their own problem. So the waste pollution largely come from land-based, 80% land-based, because from improper waste management, open dumping, leakage into the river, usually leach into the river and then go to coastal area and the oceans, and also 20% of from marine activities, it lost or discarded abandoned fishing gears and waste from ships and ports, and that are the key problem for the marine plastic issues. And impacts really have huge impacts on corals, on marine animal life, on fisheries, and you can also see it the impact on the bird as well when all this waste come into the coastal site, and it really affect our health when the food chain, our food chain, seafood, they have consumed all microplastic, and there's no clear evidence yet, but it's most likely the research have suggested that there is potential impacts when we consume the food that contain microplastic in their ingestion. So it really affects human health, and it affects ecological. It affects economics in terms of fishery when it's the aquatics animals in the oceans, animals are no longer are being affected. The population cannot grow, habitat distractions, and so on. And then there's a decline of the fish population. It affects to the people who rely on fishing sectors, and it of course it affects tourism, and it costs for clean up, and it create many other problems on ecological, human, and economic problem. And I cannot go into details with the time. I just go into a little bit only brief introductions. And also, sorry. For the second case study, it's forest loss in South Asia. South Asia to a population more than 600 million. It's 677 million people. The data in 2021. Land area is 4 million more than 4 million square kilometer, and forest loss. If you look at the data from 2001 to 2019, it lost 61 million hectares, an equivalent of 6.22 million hectares per year. And in early year 2000, forest loss was accelerating in lowland. Actually, it's mostly a distraction of the primary forest, conversion of primary forest into a plantation, for example, palm oils or rubber plantations, any other crops. And then I think the conversions start reaching out in 2010. The secondary forest loss start being it goes into more into the upland, what we call upland areas, because of the replacement of Sweden agriculture with the permanent agricultural system. So the loss of forest in South Asia, it changed from primary to secondary, and it's largely it's because of agricultural productions, a conversion of land for agricultural production, and also logging, also one of the key driver in there. And we have experienced largely, I think, in Indonesia, Laos, Myanmar, Cambodia, and quite a number of other countries that face problem with this deforestation over these 2 decades. And the impacts, of course, if you look at the impact, it's a forest, right? It's a habitat for animals. So it's, of course, without habitat, the animal, elephant, tigers, and other animals, they do not have shelter. Some of them die, of course, without food, and some have to migrate. And some animals, they need a large space for their life space for production, for reproduction, for living, for growth. So it lost without a proper habitat. There's loss of a large decline of this animal, and they have to move somewhere. And of course, forest loss, it also affects water resources and also affect land. It leads to land degradation, and the role of the forest for carbon sequestration also lost as well. It leads to the release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and it affects millions of people who depend on forests for their for subsistence, for agriculture, for cultural practices, and also it affects the economic sector for ecotourism. And if you look at the ecosystem service, one of the key ecosystem services for from forest is pollination, and it costs billions of dollars every year, because without pollination, it really affects the whole ecosystem of our ecosystem. And the third case study is the Yangtze river pollution. The land is, you know, that it originated in Himalaya in India and discharged into the Bay of Bengal from Bangladesh, and the distance is 2,500. So it goes across it's what we call transboundary. It's not located in one country, so the management have to have the more regional governance and discussion consultations. And the population is 655 million people, and they play a very important role as a source of nutrition for protein for millions of people living along the river. And it's a very important source for water consumption, for agricultural production, commercial fishing, tourism, religious practices like cleansings, for the annual rituals events, and many other services being provided by the river. So what are the problems in the Yangtze River? The problem, the emerging issue is also plastic pollution. It is the second largest pollution in the world, 0.12 million ton plastic discharge per year. And the second issue is untreated sewage pollution from urban, from municipal waste, from household consumption, which discharge 200 million liters daily discharge without treating. You imagine people just go and swim in there. So all this discharge, the bacteria, all the diseases are there, and people, because some when they go in bathing directly, it affects their health. And it really causes a lot of pollution into the water qualities. So a key problem in the river is plastic pollution and untreated sewage pollution and unsustainable fishing practices. And also dam construction can also change the ecological system as well. And there are many other issues as well. It's a gigantic river. Of course, the problem is also enormous as well. So I do not highlight. There are different problems that can arise that are in there as well, like the agricultural pollutions from agriculture, including pesticide, over use of fertilizer, and many other issues. When this happens, it really affects the ecosystem, ecological system, and water quality, in terms of water quality and availabilities. And it's the algae bloom, as I mentioned earlier, it can lead to the high level of fish death because of the shortage of oxygen and so on. And there's different the pollution from heavy industry as well that can pollute the water qualities, and it affects the human health who depends on water. Millions of them who depend on the water, and also the consumption of the aquatic resources in the river. It can go directly to the one who live along the river, and it also go far beyond the area that are adjacent to the river, all the way to the city or urban, or maybe even go further than the national boundary as well. And it affects the economic activity when the water is polluted. it affect the whole economic system actually, from the fishery production, from tourism, from to agriculture and others. I remember in 2019, yeah, when I visit Bengawan, yeah, I think that when I met Dr. Ita, yeah, that the river, Bengawan River was, it's really like pristine river, and then the production, the consumption, high level consumption of that river made the river dry, and it become the sewage, the site for sewage discharge. And it's actually, this is the clear evidence of an ecological crisis that happened on the river system. It's yeah, it's a clear example. So there are clear examples that you can find in a particular country, and you can also go beyond the country. There are issues that are quite general, that I mean happen all over the world, and there are ecological crises that can that happen only in that particular context. So I think I would like to finish my presentation here, and I give 15 minutes left for the question and answer if there are any for clarification. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Pisat, for taking our attention to this very pressing, very alarming issues on the ecological crisis in Asia. And we have seen many questions, many concerns on the in the chat room here. Maybe I would like to invite ladies first, Mbak Aning. Maybe you can unmute your microphone and raise your question directly to Dr. Pisat.
Thank you so much, Ibu Fisa, Ibu Ita, and Professor Kyo. You mentioned only that the ecological crisis and climate change, and also greenhouse gas. So related to that, I want to ask a question regarding the carbon trading. Nowadays, the carbon trading is one of the way to handle the climate change. So I will raise a question: what to extent carbon trading will impact to prevent ecological crisis? And how about the underdeveloped countries that do not have source to involve in carbon trading? Thank you so much, Prof.
Okay, thank you. Do I have to respond now, or I should take a few more questions, Dr. Ita?
Maybe you can directly comment on that.
Okay, thank you very much for the question with regard to carbon trading. It's a national scheme right now. It's already been discussed in the Kyoto Protocol on the carbon trading. We talk about voluntary market. We talk about the different scheme in order to solve the ecological crisis, particularly from the forest sector, because carbon trading itself is just protect the forest. Right now we talk about protect the forest. In the past, talk about replantation of the forest. Then you can do the measurement and sell the carbon. But to me, right now there has remained a lot of problem with that. A lot of countries, they talk about the trade-off between the conservation of the forest compared to direct economic activity. And in the voluntary market, there are still loopholes that the carbon price is not that that high, and there are still loopholes that is the strict enforcement is not there. And then you have the carbon trading in the EU market, the price higher, like $50 per ton. And then there is also we call the premium carbon price, that strict enforcement, and they need a third-party certification and so on. And not many countries have been able to apply for that premiums. And they are so it can for carbon trading, to some extent, it can solve the problem of the forest destruction, but there remain a lot of issues between the decision for the national decision making, whether to go for carbon trading or to go for the economic activities, for instance, mining or conversion of land into other more immediate profitable activities. So it's still very difficult. Actually, it's still I think to me it's a good approach, but it still remains a long way to go. Yeah, I recently also wrote a paper on that as well, on the REDD+ key mechanism for sustainable forest management. But there are many issues from the carbon credit, and then when they when they manage to sell the credit, they will use a budget for benefit sharing with local community and so on. Then there's another issue on the governance, on management, community-based participation and so on. There's another area to be discussed actually. I hope I address your concern.
Yes, thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you, Dr. Pisat. Sometimes, if we may reflect on the reality on the grassroots, we talk far and wide about climate change, but there are a lot of colleagues, people who doesn't know what climate change is. How to best, that is my question, and I think this is also everyone's question, how to best approach, how to best introduce this pressing issue to the very people. Dr. Pisat, maybe you have a comment on that before we go to Bian's question.
Thank you, Ms. Ida. I cannot on my webcam because I have a trouble in signal.
No problem.
Okay. Dear Professor, thanks for your explanation, and I will ask question about the issue of ecological or environmental crisis is very important and serious to be discussed. Moreover, a country should make its citizens aware about the direct effects of ecological crisis, and one of issue is actually about is awareness. A lot of people don't care about the effects and environmental crisis. Then how are the solution offered and adopted by the government to make the citizens aware of the just effect of ecological crisis? In fact, there have been many pamphlets and movement of organizations to prevent this, but many people, I think, that do not care about this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much on the question. So I have two questions, right? First on climate change, the second one on the ecological crisis, how the people participate. Yeah, if you look at about climate change itself, it's two issues to discuss on adaptation and mitigation. And adaptation more how we're gonna adapt when things change, things already happens. And for the mitigation, it really effort to address the core issue. The core issue, the driver of the problem is the mitigation. Try to reduce, try to protect the forest so that the emission does not go into the atmosphere and cause the problem. And a lot of people, it's always come back to the actually politics is around the climate change, more about the benefit, short-term economic benefit versus the application of a more environmentally friendly energy technology, and it more expensive with the technologies, and also that part is more on the national politics from national to national level, and then it comes to at national level, it comes to individual practice as well. How many people are willing to give up their current practices and to go more into more environmental friendly practices and give up some of their comfort, you know, for the sake of the environment. And for the effort that have been involving in climate change awareness raising so far, we have to involve with different activities. We have to do public awareness raising. We have to engage with the civil society. We have to work with the think tank, with the government agency, for many stakeholders from national to local level. And of course, the government policy have to be in there. So, and until the individual citizen participate, it will be hard to address. A lot of issues are to be addressed by the government, but again, with local, with individual citizen participation, they can call more accountability and respond from the government. And then they can put pressure on the government to come together to the table to discuss and go for way to discuss way forward. So yeah, and if you look back into climate change, still have a lot to go. We have, but if you look at 3 decades ago, a lot of achievement have been done. But of course, we are still on the way to go there. And it's similar to the ecosystem issues. And sometimes, if you look at the to address issues. It's government issues, but again, it's a role of the local individual citizen is very important. With the participation of individual citizen in terms of like forest land use, or in terms of the waste management, in terms of their consumption, energy consumption, diet, and so on, it really have a huge impact on the ecosystem. For example, I can give you the easy example of consumption of the meat. If we consume less meat, we can have more land for to grow crops, because in order to produce 1 kilogram of meat, it already needs at least 1 kilogram of crop already, and it takes a huge land in order to produce meat. And then with our consumption, sometimes we just go to waste. Like meat, sometimes we could not even consume them all, we just waste them. So if we change our consumption, it really save a lot. So again, the role of local people, not only local, I mean individual, every individual citizen play very important roles, and it takes time for awareness raising. And also there are indigenous knowledge that are sustainable with the ecosystem management. We also should learn. So to integrate indigenous knowledge with the scientific knowledge are very important for the sustainable management of the ecosystem. And again, awareness raising, it takes time. Sometimes it even generations. If I reflect myself, 20 years ago, we talked about the waste management in Cambodia. I was holding the trash and put in my pocket. All my friends and family were laughing at me. But now it become the general practice. After 20 years later, people, the one who throw trash on the street is become what we call stranger. It's no longer the normal practice. So it takes time, but we need those people who work consistently, earnestly, for the sake of the ecosystem protections, and also again for climate change combat.
Thank you, Mr. Prof. Pisat and Ms. Ita.
Thank you. So Dr. Pisat says that while the government holds the key to mitigation, and also the other stakeholders, individuals also take a key role in this in addressing this ecological crisis. All right, last but not least, we have other questions. Nielo, could you please deliver your question?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for your presentation, Professor. My question is, I have two questions. The first one is, how will developed countries keep up with green policy if we will adopt green policy? Because, for example, we have the China example. China will initially try to keep a green policy, but last week there was a slowdown of the economy. So they have a big comeback, begin to return to the policy of coal and carbon. In this sense, the developed countries, which are the most populated country in terms of population, and also the more unequal in terms of economy, how will development, technology, and policy that are green? Because it's very expensive and need time. So will developed country like Indonesia or other country adopt this type of policy? For example, also one example is Jakarta. Jakarta will draw for the high level of the sea, and the government just say, okay, we just move the capital in Kalimantan. This was the solution for Jakarta government. So do you think the developed country will adopt a green policy? Then the other question is, do you think or do you believe that more green policy will be adopted when the carbon system of production in terms of surplus air plus will be earned in terms of current will be current surplus from green policy? Because, for example, we see like 3 months ago, the CEO of Amazon, he go to space. We say, oh, we need to keep clean. We need to keep clean the planet, but just say, okay, we take the trash and we put in the space. We get no solution. We just take trash and we put in the space. It's not about to make a solution for green policy. What do you think? Because the capital system don't have a plan for make money for green policy or not yet? I don't know if you got the question or not.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Anilo. Yeah, in terms of the green policies, sometimes it's just a matter of choice whether we can afford to go for green policy or not. First, we still in some case we still have a choice, still have some room to continue with the current practice and adopt the green policy later. But sometimes the issue is immediate. For example, the ecological collapse or the river pollution is really there, or look at the waste pollution is there in Jakarta, right? So you have to address the issue. You cannot have choice. You have to adopt more green policy. You have to go for, like for example, waste you have to segregate properly before, and also make sure that it doesn't flow into the river system itself. So I'm just giving the more visualized example that the green policies, sometimes the problem there, and we have to respond, and we have to be more proactive and go for green initiative, or else we cannot survive. It's just a matter of survival is at stake. Then we have to respond. And in terms of the country in ASEAN right now, there is a move into decarbonization by 2050 or 2060 by mid century. I also involved with the project led by a sustainable development network led by Professor Jeffrey Sachs and other ASEAN thinker. So we have to respond actually for green to some extent. Right now, more of the country that I have studied look at different cases. It just take time, just buy. But while other rich, just by time, while other rich countries, they move ahead with the green technology because they have an advantage there, and they can sell the technology and science to other countries to follow as well. And for us, for the developing country or least developed country, we just follow the trends. But again, it's also beneficial for us. The easy case, if you say like, oh, fossil fuel is cheap. It's cheap, and right now it make more sense to go for fossil fuels. Then when the air pollution comes, like it affect your health, affect all the leader health, affect everybody. Will you stick with that cheap cost of productions, or will you change that when the survival at stage? And then again with another factor is external force. I think right now the EU already issued the ASEAN Green Deal. They have the carbon law, and they will put tax on the carbon intensive. And if you don't, if they use the trade, the sanctions, and even small country, if you are big enough, you can negotiate. But if you are small, you do not adapt, you will be fined. They will be, what we call, they will put tax on us. Then some of the factory, they would move somewhere else. So as a leader, and I'm talking as on behalf as the role of the think tanker, you have to think ahead 10, 20 years or 30 years ahead, or else you cannot adapt. So green policy is the way forward, or else you would be any country would be left behind, especially for the country developing country like us. So yeah, that I think that would be my response to your question. I hope it addresses your concern.
Thank you for the answer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But our time is going down. It's 10:05 here. Thank you for bringing the heat of the discussion about the ecological crisis in Asia this morning. Prof. Pisat, Dr. Pisat has shown about the drivers of the ecological crisis in Asia. And if I may follow his overview, I would like to pick up I will be the second speaker, by the way. I would like to pick up one of the driving factors of this ecological or environmental crisis in Southeast Asia or in Asia or in the global world, in fact, that is about the anthropogenic maritime disaster. But before that, give a big applause to Dr. Pisat for this morning. Thank you so very much. As well, maybe before we move forward, let us have a 1 minute break and then see you again in a minute.